I'm Cayman Jason. This is the way I see it. So the divers are all gone. We're going to put this boat away and head over to a dive site called Stingray City. Now that's located on the edge of the North Sound. It's about 15 feet and the dive site's covered in southern stingrays. So when you're ready to go, let's go visit Stingray City.
Stingray City is a challenging environment. I'll start by saying that. Now, you wouldn't think that at first look because it's full of amazing photographic subjects swimming all around, and it's nice and shallow, so you've got plenty of bottom time, but there are a few things that you have to deal with in this environment. And you can see I'm just starting up with my normal setup, you know, sort of getting my camera settings ready, making sure that I don't have any air bubbles on my lens, and getting my white balance down. And I'll just start with the challenging environment. As you can see, the sun is coming up and down. And as that sun comes up and down and the video gets brighter and darker, that changes my white balance. So I'm constantly having to make adjustments for that. Now also I've got some strobes on my rig here. They're on there because I never know if I need to use them or not. Sometimes I don't bring them at all. Today I have them on, but it's pretty unlikely I'm going to shoot them because this bottom is so turbid. So here's my first shot that I took. And it's a vertical. As you can see, the stingray sort of swam right at me. And I love this shot. And the still image, unlike the video that you're looking at, has beautiful tones. It's got the natural color in it. The sand is the color that it's supposed to be. The blue water in the background has that natural aqua tone to it. That's what the water actually looks like there. And if you look in the background, you can see those sun rays streaming through the surface, breaking through the surface, reaching down toward the stingray. I really like this image. It's a nice vertical. I did crop it just a little bit. My settings were 1/160th of a second, f7.1, ISO 100 at 15 millimeter focal length. And I think it's a nice image. It's not an award-winning image by any means, but it's a nice image. So periodically throughout this video, you'll see my man Chris Sanchez. He's one of our captains at Ambassador Divers. You'll see him swimming down and feeding the stingrays squid. And these stingrays are very fickle. You know, if you stop feeding them, they'll swim away. So it's important at Stingray City to keep them fed so they hang around. Now, for those of you who will probably lash out at me for feeding wild animals, I'll just say that Stingray City has been around since the late 50s, early 60s, and these stingrays have been hand-fed here in the Cayman Islands ever since then. Although it is illegal to feed wildlife in the waters surrounding the Cayman Islands, it is absolutely legal to feed the wildlife inside the special wildlife interaction zone, and that's where we are. So we're not doing anything illegal here by feeding these stingrays. This is, as I'd mentioned, has been done since the late 50s, early 60s, and these stingrays have become accustomed to it over that time. Here's the second image I chose from the series, and this is kind of a fun image. I've got Paul over here on the right side of the screen, and I had to crop into this a little bit to make it fit the video aspect properly, so I did crop into it a little bit more than I like. But I've got the stingrays that balance out the image, so you've got Paul on the right, and then you've got this beautiful southern stingray, this female on the left-hand side, and she's sort of arching up to swim over the top of Paul's head there, and she really brings a natural balance to the image. Now you can see that the sand is white, it's the color it's supposed to be. The blue is also the color it's supposed to be, and there's not a lot of backscatter or turbidity in this image, and that's because I'm shooting a custom white balance with ambient light without my strobes. Had I chosen to fire the strobes in this image, what you would have seen would be a little light backscatter all throughout the image, and that would have been a real monster to clean up in post. All in all, I'm very, very happy with how this image turned out. You can see here that I'm between shots sort of making some adjustments with my strobe arms, and it's more or less just trying to get closer to the bottom without having my strobe heads bump into the sand. I'm not a big fan of touching anything sand-wise to my camera. I tend to get a lot of sand in the O-rings. It sticks to the silicone. But here's the shot. Here's the next shot. It's a vertical shot, and the reason I chose this from the series is I wanted to show you I'll talk a little bit about composition and how I like to line my images. Now, this is the rule of thirds, so I've got the stingray at the bottom of the image, straight through the bottom third of the image, and the boat is through the top of the image in the same sort of area, right through that third line. Now, they're both lined up directly in the center, which makes for a really pleasing image. Again, going back to tonality, you'll see that the water is the color that it's meant to be. The sand is the color it's meant to be. And I do sometimes white balance my camera to the sand. Today I didn't. The light was changing so much that I found it to be a better option for me on this dive to white balance to my white card than just to sand. And as you can see in the image, the sand came out in the perfect color of off-white. Now if you look closely at the image, you'll also notice that you see the reflection of my lens. You'll see that round scratch, it looks like underneath the boat. And again, that's what you get when you shoot up into the sun with a DSLR. You're going to get some reflection back from your dome port, reflecting back the surface of your lens. So to change perspective a little bit, I swam up and got above the rays, and I wanted to shoot down on a few of them, and just to get a different perspective or a different angle on the shot. And this is the shot that I came out with, and I turned this into a black and white because the images feel a little bit samey. So I was almost directly above this female, and as you'll note by my camera settings, 1/160th f7.1 ISO 100 at 15 millimeters, I didn't change anything throughout this whole dive. The only thing I changed was my white balance because of the sun changing above me. So everything sort of remained the same. But I just want to talk about a little bit about this image because I found it striking in a very odd kind of way. The debris on the bottom underneath the stingray sort of helps balance out this image. If you draw a line right down the center, you'll see that sort of the width of the stingray equals the width of the debris field, and it's kind of balanced in a yin-yang kind of an odd shape, an odd way against it, and it caught my eye, and I wanted to add this one to the mix. This next image is a technique that I utilize quite often, and I thought it would be important to share with you guys. You're not always going to photograph something head on, and I use this technique oftentimes when sharks pass me by. Everyone wants to get the head-on turtle or the head-on shark or the head-on ray, but when they pass you, if you can get them tail and everything square in the center of the image, I think it makes for a very unique image. I love this image, but especially when a shark swims past you, if you can get their tail to fill your frame and get them dead center of the image, I think it's a very unique image, and it's not a lot that underwater photographers often chase. But I like the way that this stingray, his wings are fully extended, dead center in the image. It makes for an interesting image, and it gives you sort of twice the opportunity, because as the critter swims toward you, you try to get it, but then remember, turn around and then chase after it just a little bit, not in an aggressive manner, but swim after it and try to get it dead center in the frame.
Welcome to the west side of Grand Cayman, guys. We're out here on beautiful 7 Mile Beach on a cloudy Sunday morning. And what I want to talk to you guys today about are my underwater baseline settings for my camera. Now, over the past 20 years, I've seen a lot of divers get on the boat with their new DSLR rig or their new Micro Four Thirds rig, and they don't have a real good understanding of where to start. So today we're going to jump on the boat and we're going to talk about baseline settings. Welcome aboard, guys. We're on my favorite dive boat, Juggernaut, out here with my favorite dive company, Ambassador Divers, and today we're talking about baseline settings. So we're talking about ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. So let's start with shutter speed. Now, when you talk about shutter speed, I want you guys to think about it like this. How quickly that shutter opens and closes dictates how much light you get on your sensor, okay? Now, what we're talking about specifically today is ambient light photography. So we're going to talk about strobe photography on another video. So for ambient light photography, my go-to baseline setting for shutter speed is 1/100th of a second. Now let's explain. The speed at which your shutter and your shutter opens and closes will dictate how much light goes to your sensor. For ambient light photography, obviously we want to show us as slow a shutter as possible while still maintaining sharpness in our image. So if you slow it down too much, you're going to get motion blur. If you speed it up too much, you're not going to get enough light to the sensor to illuminate your subject. Number 2, aperture. Now, with the lens that I'm shooting on my wide angle kit, it's my 8-15 zoom L series. Now, this is a super wide lens. It takes in a lot of light. It's an f4 lens, and my go-to aperture is going to be f11. And I can use that pretty much with any lens that I'm using on my Canon 5D Mark IV. For baseline settings, for you beginners out there, I want you to start sort of middle of the road. So f11 will give you enough depth of field that you're not worried about your subject not being in focus, but it'll also allow enough light into your system to make sure that you get a good illuminated subject. Number 3, ISO. Now, when you're working with ISO, you want to stay as close to your camera's native range as possible. So that means keeping your ISO as low as you can. Now, I'm shooting a Canon 5D Mark IV and a Canon 5D Mark III. And I know these cameras can shoot pretty high ISO without getting an image too noisy. But my baseline setting, or my jumping off point for ISO, is 1000. Use these baseline settings to get the best out of your underwater photography.